Hello everyone, and welcome back to NPA Discovery, the place where we dig deeper than headlines, where the smiles and scars of famous lives are explored in full color. If you're passionate about stories that are messy, heartbreaking, yet ultimately human, then you've found your people. Today, we're taking a long, hard, and honest look at the story of comedian Arty Lang, a man whose name is often mentioned with laughter, but whose real-life journey is marked by pain, addiction, loss, and unbelievable comebacks. Before we go further, please take a second to hit that like button, share this video with someone who appreciates raw truth, and subscribe to our channel. Your support gives us the strength to keep digging deep into the lives that matter. Born in 1967 in Livingston, New Jersey, Arty Lang didn't come from a broken home in the typical sense. His father, Arthur Sr., was a hard-working contractor, someone Arty would later describe as Superman, scaling rooftops to install TV antennas, the symbol of suburban America in the 70s. But beneath that all-American image lurked shadows. Arthur Sr. wasn't just a blue-collar dad. On the very day of Arty's birth, he was charged with storing counterfeit money for the mob. That's right, from day one, Arty's life was already linked with a kind of double life, reality on the surface, and chaos beneath. This duality would follow him forever. Arty idolized his dad, and when tragedy struck, it shook the core of who he was. Arthur Sr. fell from a roof while working, rendering him a quadriplegic. Suddenly, Arty went from being a carefree teenager to carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. Gone were the dreams of college parties or easy living. Instead, there were hospital bills, financial collapse, and the emotional fallout of watching his hero suffer. Let's pause here. Because this is where Arty's story becomes something more than just the cliched, funny guy with a drug problem. This was a teenager whose entire world turned upside down, who gave up his dreams, not because he lacked ambition, but because he had heart. And it was from this heartbreak that Arty found comedy. In one unforgettable moment, while giving a presentation in class, he cracked a joke, and the class roared with laughter. It was the first time he felt power, release, purpose. The seed of stand-up was planted in pain. But here's the tragedy: comedy, for Arty, wasn't just a profession. It was a drug. And like any drug, the dose had to keep increasing. His rise in the industry was fast. After years of open mics, day jobs, and doing everything short of selling his soul, Arty got his big break with Mad TV in 1995. From a pool of 8,000 applicants, he was one of 8 chosen to launch one of television's boldest sketch comedy experiments. It should have been a dream come true. And for a while, it was. He created iconic characters, had audiences rolling in the aisles, and started earning real money. But instead of investing it in his future, Arty fed his past. His vices, cocaine, alcohol, gambling, grew hungrier with success. And as is often the case with sensitive souls, the highs of applause couldn't silence the lows of his inner pain. The collapse of a superhero. Growing up in New Jersey, Arty Lang saw his father as more than a provider. He was a real-life superhero. Arty would later say, "He was like Superman to me." His father was strong, fearless, and had this old-school toughness that young Arty idolized. He'd climb rooftops, install television antennas, and come home with stories that dazzled his son. It was that kind of admiration that shaped Arty's view of what being a man meant: dependable, daring, and larger than life. But heroes fall. And when they do, it leaves behind a silence that's almost unbearable. In a tragic twist of fate, while working on a rooftop job, Lang's father fell and became a quadriplegic. The physical pain was immense, but for Arty, the emotional fallout hit even harder. Suddenly, their Superman was paralyzed, and their world turned upside down. Arty was barely out of high school, standing at a crossroads. Should he chase the dream of becoming a stand-up comedian, or stay behind to support his now broken family? He chose family. And that's important to recognize. Behind the raunchy jokes and outlandish antics that would later define his public image, there was a young man with heart. He put his comedy dreams on hold to help his mother with mounting medical bills. They even went so far as to contact celebrities, hoping to auction donated items to raise money. Most never replied. But one man did, Howard Stern. Stern's gift wasn't just financial, it was personal. He sent an autographed jacket and a joke that, believe it or not, brought genuine laughter to Artie and his father during a very dark time. It's easy to underestimate the power of kindness until it shows up when you need it most. That single gesture planted a seed. Years later, it would come full circle in ways no one could have imagined. But even as Artie clung to hope, life continued dealing out gut punches. His father's health declined, and eventually, he passed away. It was a loss that shook Artie to his core, a pain he would never truly escape. And here's where the story pivots. You see, tragedy can either destroy you or drive you. Artie, in his own chaotic way, chose the latter. He turned pain into punchlines. That decision set him on a path that would bring him fame, fortune, and a mountain of heartache. But in that moment, it was a way out. A way to reclaim control over a life that had spun wildly off course. If you're finding this story as compelling as we are, take a second to like, share, and subscribe. Every bit of support helps us keep telling the raw, real stories behind the spotlight. Rocket to the top, crash to the bottom. Arty Lang's journey into comedy didn't start with glitz or glamour, it started with failure. His very first set at the Improv in Manhattan was a 5-minute disaster. He bombed so hard that he didn't step on stage again for 4 years. But that's the thing about Artie, he doesn't quit, even when he probably should. He worked odd jobs, most notably as a cab driver, just to scrape together enough to make it to gigs. He'd double park his taxi outside comedy clubs, run in, do his set, and sprint back before getting ticketed. That's hustle. That's hunger. And that's a man trying to outrun not just failure, but grief. His big break came in 1995 when he was selected from over 8,000 hopefuls to join the original cast of Mad TV. Almost overnight, Lang went from working-class comic to household name. His character, My White Mama, became iconic. He was bringing in serious money, $7,500 per episode, far more than he'd ever seen before. But here's the cruel twist, the success that should have saved him nearly destroyed him. With money came access. With access came excess. Artie fell into a whirlwind of drugs, drinking, and recklessness. His substance use wasn't about partying, it was about numbing. The pain of losing his father, the pressure of fame, and the lifelong struggle with depression all collided. And eventually, he cracked. Just 9 episodes into Mad TV, Lang spiraled so badly that he attempted to take his own life. He left goodbye letters for his mother and sister, convinced the world would be better off without him. His castmates found him just in time. Lang was checked into rehab, for the first time. It wouldn't be the last. When he returned to Mad TV after treatment, something astonishing happened, he was better. Funnier. Sharper. More alive on stage than ever before. His performances were electric, and critics hailed him as a breakout star. But addiction doesn't surrender easily. And Artie's demons weren't done with him yet. The highs, the lows, and the unthinkable. Despite the chaos surrounding him, Lang's return to Mad TV initially felt like a comeback story. He was getting laughs again. His performances were crisp, quick, and punchy, almost like his brush with death had temporarily ignited something creative inside him. Fans started to believe he was on the mend. But addiction is never that simple. It lingers in the background, waiting for a moment of weakness. 2 months into filming the second season, Artie fell off the wagon in spectacular fashion. After losing $15,000 on a Mike Tyson vs. Evander Holyfield boxing match, Lang turned to drugs to soothe his bruised ego. His co-stars tried to intervene, but Lang wasn't ready to be helped. In a moment that could have been ripped from a tragic comedy sketch, he literally ran from them, down the streets of Los Angeles, until he was cornered in a parking lot. Authorities took him into custody, and just when it seemed things couldn't get worse, he got another call, he'd been cut from Jerry Maguire. That was the price of his unraveling. Stand-up, setbacks, and second chances. With his television career in jeopardy, Lang did what many comics do when the spotlight dims: he returned to the stage. Stand-up had always been his safe haven, his church, his battlefield. And it was there, among the bright lights and drunk hecklers, that he tried to find his footing again. But even this return was fraught with trouble. Lang's reputation followed him like a shadow. Comedy clubs were hesitant to book him, unsure if he'd even show up, or worse, show up high. Some nights, he killed. Others, he bombed. But he kept going. Then came a lifeline: Norm Macdonald. The legendary comedian saw something in Artie that others had missed, an underlying sadness beneath the laughter. He cast Lang in the cult classic Dirty Work, giving him one more shot to prove he could handle a real Hollywood role. There was just one problem: the studio wanted proof that Lang was clean. He wasn't, but with a little donation to the rehab facility he'd bailed on, he managed to secure the paperwork he needed. It was a band-aid on a bullet wound, but it worked. Dirty Work put Lang back on the radar. Studios started calling. Offers came in. For a brief moment, it looked like he'd beaten the odds. From Stern to Sorrow, the golden mic that couldn't save him. When you think of a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, imagine this: Arty Lang, battered from relapses, haunted by his past, and dangling from a thread, receives a call that could redefine his entire career. Howard Stern, the same radio legend who once sent a jacket to Artie's paralyzed father as an act of kindness, was now holding auditions to fill a permanent spot on his show. His longtime sidekick Jackie Martling had left, and Stern launched the "Win Jackie's Money" contest to find the next voice for his rowdy, unapologetically honest airwaves. Lang didn't think he had a shot. He knew the competition was fierce. There were hundreds of comics, many cleaner, more reliable, and frankly, more stable than him. But Artie had something none of them did: a raw, unfiltered authenticity, and a history with Stern that quietly resonated. He told his manager, "I may not be the funniest, but I guarantee I'm the biggest fan." And sometimes, passion wins over polish. Stern saw it too. Lang wasn't just another funny guy, he was a bruised, deeply human voice that listeners connected with. Stern gave him a chance, not just as a writer, but as a live personality. One day they told him, "We're keeping the mic on. Say something funny when you feel it." That mic may as well have been a lightning rod. Artie's off-the-cuff quips and brutal honesty made him a fan favorite almost instantly. He wasn't trying to be anyone else. He wasn't polished. He was raw, unvarnished, and often a little too honest, which, on the Howard Stern show, was the best possible trait. He talked about his addictions on air. His failed attempts at sobriety. His family trauma. He wasn't just a comic, he became the show's emotional core. One listener called him the voice of the broken people. And he wore that label with pride. But here's where things get complicated. Because even as the world was laughing, Artie was still hurting. During this peak of success, he was making more money than ever before. His stand-up gigs were selling out nationwide. On weekends, he'd hit the road and rake in $3 million a year. During the week, he sat beside his idol on a national radio show. And yet, he was unraveling again. The pressure of early mornings, late-night flights, and constant expectations became overwhelming. His depression, long buried under self-deprecating jokes, resurfaced. He turned to something that felt familiar: painkillers. And not just a few. Artie later admitted to taking up to 20 painkillers a day just to cope. When those ran out, he moved on to even heavier drugs. This is where we stop and ask the real question: how much success can a person handle before it becomes a curse? Because while fame saved Artie's career, it was wrecking his soul. Between 2005 and 2008, he cleaned up just enough to keep the train moving. He filmed movies. He performed in Afghanistan for U.S. troops. He recorded comedy specials that still hold up today. But he was walking a tightrope with no net. Then came the incident that nearly ended it all. One night, Lang invited an exotic dancer-turned-drug dealer into his hotel room. He thought he was just partying, until he woke up to find her injecting him with something unknown. That terrifying loss of control was a warning sign, one he almost ignored. And when he missed a scheduled appearance on the Comedy Central roast of Bob Saget, everyone around him knew the downward spiral had begun again. Comedy Central offered to send a private plane with a doctor on board, just to get him to the roast. But Artie declined. Why? Because he knew exactly what that doctor would do if he begged for morphine to calm his nerves. In his own words, he'd do it to keep Comedy Central happy, and I'd end up having a heart attack. That refusal might have saved his life. But it didn't stop the storm that followed. Arty Lang's story isn't just about addiction or comedy. It's about survival. It's about what happens when the laughter fades and all that's left is you, broken, honest, and bare. But it's also a story about how pain can be repurposed into purpose. How every relapse doesn't mean failure, it just means the fight isn't over. Arty Lang didn't take the easy road. He stumbled, he crawled, he begged, he bled. But he never gave up. And if there's one lesson we should all carry from his life, it's this: you can fall 1,000 times, and still rise. Still heal. Still be better. So, if you or someone you love is struggling, don't wait for rock bottom. Reach out. Ask for help. And know that even from the darkest corners, redemption is still possible. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the life of Arty Lang. Until next time, keep dreaming, and never stop believing in the magic inside you.